guys. So we are now in Barcelona at Chainlink Smartcon conference, and here with you, Anna Tutova, co-founder of Coins and our guest, Laurence Moroney, who is AI lead at Google. And great to have you here, Laurence.
It's wonderful to be here. Thanks for setting this up.
Yeah, and Laurence does much more things. He's involved as well in different AI projects, and as well, he even does script writing with AI, and he'll tell us more now on what he does. So can you tell us how did you get acquainted with machine learning AI technology first, and how did you get involved and ending up working in this industry?
Sure. So, my story is actually a funny one because it started over 30 years ago in AI, and it was the British government back in like 1992, so 31 years ago, had set up a program where they wanted to bring in 20 people and they would train them in artificial intelligence, with the vision being that this group of people could be a core that could consult with various companies and that kind of thing, and maybe help spur the economy. It was in the middle of a recession, and it failed completely because AI just wasn't ready for prime time. But I got bitten by the bug, and it was something that I was very much interested in. But my career went on other paths until about 8 years ago. I was at Google at the time, and Google decided to publicly become an AI-first company. And one of the things that had really, obviously I was intrigued by AI to begin with, but one of the things that really intrigued me was the new possible uses of machine learning that we hadn't really thought about 30 plus years ago. And like a classic one is Google, one of the things notorious for is some of the perks, including food, right? So there's like breakfast, lunch, and sometimes dinner. But if you're a company that's worth a lot of money and you're giving free food to people, you're going to be under the magnifying glass for wasted food. So it was one of the things that was very careful to do was to use machine learning to predict how much food to serve in the cafes. And like the cafe in the office that I was working in, it was called Kirkland in Washington, was like able to show that the food wastage was minuscule, because using AI and using a machine learning model, they were able to predict, okay, if we serve this much food and we serve it on this day and when the weather's like this, here's the amount that we need to prepare so that we're not throwing food away. You know, that kind of stuff. And it was like little practical uses like that were really, really intriguing. And
so it started just internally 8 years ago for Google itself?
Yeah, it was started long before that internally, but then the public facing stuff, releasing things like TensorFlow, I think that's 9 years ago, and like really trying to spur AI development using what we've built our own systems on for many years, but make that available to the public was really then where I started getting involved again. And just to really start helping developers as opposed to academics, to really succeed with AI. Because at that point, there were like, was it 2016 maybe? There were 300,000 people in the world who were qualified at AI. And the way that they were counted was they had their name on a dissertation somewhere. Right, but at the time there were 30 million software developers, and so I came up with the idea was that like, well, if we could convert or train 10% of the software developers, we'd increase the number of AI practitioners globally by 10x. And if there are 10x AI practitioners globally, and now AI can really start to take off, and the average developer can have it as part of their toolbox, now think about all of these things that people can build if you're not at Google or if you're not at Microsoft or Amazon, and small companies, startups, all of these kind of things could really start building artificially intelligent solutions by using machine learning. And that's really where that passion began, and that's where I started on this journey. I call it informing and inspiring the world at scale. So it's really about the possibilities with AI, and then encouraging software developers to make it a part of their toolbox and not see it as this mysterious thing that you have to be like some kind of wizard or PhD to be able to do, because it's just code.
So how many AI developers do you have now at Google?
I don't know how many at Google, but trained in the world, there are about 4 million. And so about 3 million on our framework. There are others on other frameworks, that kind of thing. And this is before the advent of generative AI. So I would say we've largely succeeded with the vision of training 10% of the software developers. But now we're entering a new phase with the advent of generative AI. What I kind of like, the way I always try to express it inside of Google is I call it the 330-300. right? Today, there are 3 million people who can build AI systems. There are 30 million developers. But what if, using generative AI, now there are people who are able to create applications, and what will the world look like if there are 300 million of them? Because if you think about it, a developer, what we do is we need to create a solution, we express that in a language, and we express it today in a language that a computer understands, like Java or C or Python or whatever. But now with large language models, we don't necessarily have to express it in a language the computer understands. We can express it in a language we understand, and then start actually building applications in that way. And we're not there yet, but it's not impossible to project, like, not much further in the future. Like, if we make it that easy for anybody to be able to craft something using natural language, then you could have 300 million developers, and
So how long should it take, in your opinion, to reach that AGI?
I don't see that as AGI, first of all. I generally don't like the term AGI for a whole variety of reasons. But to reach that goal of there being 300 million developers, I think that could be reached in 5 years.
That's pretty quick.
I think it is, but if you look at the growth of generative AI, like ChatGPT, the number of users that got relatively quickly, that kind of stuff, that's a very strong signal that we're going in that direction. And when we look at the biggest companies in the world, they're all built on tech, and tech is built by developers, right? And if we can 10x the number of developers in the world, what's that going to do for industries in the world? What are the force multipliers going to be there, where we have, whole new classes of industry that weren't feasible before now being easy, and cheap to build. And, that means we can hopefully distribute the wealth, because there's more than enough to go around, and to distribute that effectively to places that are maybe previously underserved in the technical revolutions of the past.
And what are the most interesting use cases of application of AI for you?
Oh boy, the most interesting use cases, there's so many. I think one of them for me is social good. And social good being everything from medicine to environment. Like the example I mentioned earlier on about food wastage. Sometimes when we think about solving environmental problems, we think about solving the big things of global warming. And it might be one big solution, like a big AGI, will never happen. But multitudes of small solutions, fixing small problems, making those small problems easy and to solve, and then compounding them on top of each other to be able to build a better environment, or to be able to build better healthcare, or to be able to build better social welfare. All of these kind of things are all feasible, they're all possible. They will require a critical mass of people who are able to do it, who are empowered to do it. And I think that's part of the passion of what I'm trying to drive here. Is again, if there are 300 million developers, what kind of big problems are they able to solve? I think that's one of them. And then the other one, really from a hobbyist perspective, for want of a better term, is that some art is very difficult to do. Like we just had a panel on art, and for me, I generally see art as being, there's two things. Number one is the internal creativity that you pull out of yourself, and number two is the craft that you use to turn that into an output, right? I can't paint to save my life, so I don't have the craft, but I'm sure there are things that I would love to be able to express in painting. I can write, and then there's a craft behind writing, and to be able to put those two together to produce an output. And with the advent of a lot of large language models, of generative AI models, right now the two big ones are creating language and creating images, but we're not that far from creating video, we're not that far from creating 3D, we're not that far from creating metaverses from the prompts and this kind of thing. To be able to unleash that type of creativity in people, that the same kind of explosion I was talking about in developers, you could have an explosion in artists. And where art was restricted to relatively few people, now what if art is available and anybody can produce beautiful, amazing things and do it at scale?
And do you think that AI generated art can be valuable the same as human generated art?
Yes, in short. I mean, I think there's a spectrum, right? There's a lot of human-generated art that's not very good, and there's a lot of human-generated art that's amazing. And I think there will be a very similar spectrum for AI-generated art. And I think one of the things that art is really in the eye of the beholder. There shouldn't be any gatekeepers in the art community. And I think one gatekeeping that's going on right now is that if it's AI-generated, it's not valid, because I just don't believe in that. And it's almost like saying if it's watercolor, it's not valid. It has to be oil, or that type of thing. So, I mean, but because we're still at the very early days of the industry, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of doubt. And I think as more and more we get exposed to these kind of things, and more real artists start using these things and helping the rest of us understand them better. Right, anybody can go to an image generation thing and type in a prompt and get it to produce a picture. The argument is that art? Maybe, maybe not. But when an artist is actually able to unleash their creativity, show us how to use these things, show us how to use these things better, and now someone like me can go to one of these and I'll be able to create something far more beautiful because I've been guided by an artist than I would have been able to do before. I think that has legs, and I think that's the kind of thing that, yes, I think it can be very valuable, and I'm really excited about that future.
And you as well created the screenwrite for Stargate via AI. It was even before ChatGPT, like in March, May 2021. So can you tell more about that project?
Sure. It was a very interesting project where the TV show Stargate was celebrating its 25th anniversary. And the producer wanted to get the cast together to kind of do a new episode of Stargate. And unfortunately, the MGM who made it had been sold to Amazon. The whole deal wasn't fully closed, and there was no way that they could bring in writers and bring in and create a normal type of episode. So he struck upon the idea of well, what if we can use an AI to generate a script, and then we bring everybody in, and it's during COVID, we'll do it over Zoom, and we'll do a table read of that script. And this was pre-ChatGPT, but it wasn't pre-T, where the T in ChatGPT stands for transformers. So it was I knew the creator previously from other projects that I'd worked on. He wasn't aware I'm working on AI now, so I reached out to him after I saw his message, and it was just perfect serendipity. So I created transformer-based models, like mini ChatGPTs for each of the characters, and a mini ChatGPT for the plot. And then I had these all interact with each other, and I would give it a seed and would get fans to say, okay, what do you want the episode to be about? And then one agent would start generating the story, and then would see how each of the characters would respond to what's happening in the story, and then would pick them and just assemble a script out of that. And then we got all the actors together and we filmed them doing it, and we had a lot of laughs.
So how long did it take to create that AI-generated script?
So writing the code to create and train each of the models only took me 2 or 3 weeks. It really wasn't that long. And then once I had them running them, it would just spit out the script very quickly, that kind of thing. So we ended up generating about 7 scripts. I think we filmed 5, and it took me an afternoon to do it. They weren't very good, but they were very interesting. And the more interesting part of it for me, and it's again, when we look at the intersection of humans and AI, it was if you looked at these scripts on a piece of paper and you read them, you'd be like, this is garbage. This isn't very good. There's a lot of words that don't make sense. There's a lot of things that are contradictory. But then when we brought the skill of the human actors, and they read it, and they were in character, and if you like the TV show, you were visiting old friends that you hadn't seen in so long, and that intersection of what was created by the AI on the page and what was created by the human interpreting those words and performing them was just it was beautiful, it was mind-blowing. We had a lot of laughs, we had some tears, that kind of thing. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's fun. And now you as well, you told that you will have some talks on Hollywood AI scripts and etc. So what the future holds for us, and whether all these human jobs will be eliminated and everything will be done by AI in future?
Absolutely not. I always resist the idea of if we think that an AI is going to eliminate human jobs solely, I think we're misunderstanding how this thing works. That's not to say some jobs will be eliminated. They always are from technological advancements. But if we look at history, almost always in history, when there's a technological revolution that removes some jobs, it ends up still being a net increase. Let me give one example of that personally affected me. And that was I remember 25 years ago, I was studying in Wales, and my family lived in Ireland, which meant I would have to fly back for the holidays. Now, today, when you're flying, you go to Expedia or you go to Google Travel or something like that, and you type it in, you get your fare and you buy it. Then I had to get on my feet and I had to walk around the city, and I had visited maybe 10 different travel agencies, And like within each travel agency, I'm spending half an hour or 45 minutes working with a person, trying to find the best fare, saying, well, what about Wednesday? What about Tuesday? What about this airline? What about that airline? And they all had different slices of the data. And it took me an entire day, to go through, and I'd write down all of these ones that, to get the best fare, go back, call my parents, can I do this day? Will you pay this much? That kind of thing. It took 1 hour of each of the time of these people, and it was massively inefficient, but someone has to pay for all of that time. And as a result, airfares were much higher. These people, the travel agents, were taking a cut of those airfares. And what happened was, just massive inefficiency. And then the internet came along, and those people lost their jobs. But did the travel industry shrink? No, right? The travel industry has grown massively since then. So that one particular role, of the 10 of them, maybe only one of them is still doing it, that kind of stuff might have shrunk by 90%. But the industry that they're in as a whole grew massively. And so going back to things like writing that we were just talking about, well, first of all, an AI can't write a script for you. That's a daydream,
But people they're asking ChatGPT to write for them like a fairy tale or poem or something like that? Or
Yep.
do you mean that a script write is just too long a piece
So
of writing?
I think it's too long and it's too complex. Both of those are fixable, but it's not there today. Going back to art and craft, there's a massive amount of craft that has to go into a screenplay that an AI is just not capable of doing or understanding yet. Now, if I as a human am trying to create that screenplay, I can have it assist me with the craft. So now as a result, and I'll use myself as a personal example, for years I was trying to sell movies to Hollywood. I was writing scripts, they were poorly crafted, they weren't getting past the script reader stage. But now, when I'm working on it and I'm working with an AI assistant alongside me, and it's helping spot the mistakes that I'm making in craft, in characterization, in plot, in tone, like in the movie, jump to the end of the story, I've been successful in selling a movie to Hollywood. We're hopefully going to get that into production next year.
Can you share more details?
Sure, it's called Vital Powers, and it's about you're going to love this one. It's about a character he's a lot like Elon Musk. This was originally pitched and written before Elon bought Twitter, just have to put that disclaimer. But he's a tech billionaire, he's got his finger in many different pies, and his son gets killed in a school shooting. And in the US we have a terrible, way too many school shootings, and nothing ever happens. And so he becomes incredibly frustrated with the lack of action and the lack of solving this problem. So he decides to use his powers, his control of tech, his understanding of crypto, his understanding of AI, to make changes, to basically bring the government down. He becomes effectively a domestic terrorist in order to effect those changes. And the only person who can stop him is his daughter. And so that's the general plot of the movie. That general story arc is good, but that's plot, right? To be able to sell a movie, you have to have strong themes, you have to have strong characters, you have to have strong story arcs, you need a good protagonist, you need a good antagonist, you need to be able to line up in what's called a beat sheet. And there's all of these different things that I'd no clue how to do. I could write down a plot perfectly happily, but it was until I was then able to do that and then get a large language model and some tools to query that, show me where I was wrong, and then continually have them sitting on my shoulder, nagging me. It wasn't until I was able to do all that and get it right that it made me 100 times better as a writer. But it's not putting anybody out of a job. And in this case, it's created a job for me. And I think anybody who's an existing writer doesn't need to be scared of it, because it can make them, with the craft and the knowledge that they have, make them even more efficient and allow them more time to be creative and less time to focus on craft.
Yeah, it increases productivity and so on.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
The last question, can you share your opinion on the possible intersection of AI and blockchain? What will
Sure,
be the best use
sure.
cases?
Oh, there's so many use cases that I couldn't list them all, but I think one of the things that, and particularly coming out of Smartcon, is that, trust is very, very important. And in the age of generative AI, there's two places where trust can be eroded. Number one, generative AI models are prone to hallucinations, right? They, by definition, are generative. In other words, they make stuff up. And when people are leaning on them for facts when they're not factual, it's if you look at a piece of text that's created by a generative AI, you have to realize that it was generative. So you need to be able to understand the trust level of that. And so that if the trust level of that can be enhanced by having on-chain assistance, suddenly the doors are blown wide open for what can be possible. And then the second part of it is like identity and verification. These models are trained on data, and a lot of time it would be really nice to know, like for the next generation of these models, what if I provide data to them? What if it's trained on my books? What if it's trained on my screenplays or my art or any of those kind of things? Now, if I assert the identity of that information on chain, and it's proven that it belongs to me, and a future model creator is pulling in those data sources and knowing who owns them, then whenever it creates something, the attribution for that can be fed back to me, or reward for that can be fed back to me. And if reward for that is fed back, you set up that virtuous cycle where more people will be incentivized to put data on chain and make AI even better. So there's so many of these ways that it can be done that, it would take me all day to list them all.
Thank you for such interesting conversation and sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you so much, and it's been wonderful.